touchdown. It's through 50. He's got the speed. Touchdown.
Welcome into another episode of Mac and Mose. Andy McNamara, joined by the editor-in-chief of GoDucks.com, Rob Mosley. Fall camp is officially over. Hard to believe. It's been a long 2.5 weeks in some aspects, and it's gone by, rather quickly as we're rapidly approaching kickoff against South Dakota on August 30th. The team only took part in 2 sort of full squad scrimmages in camp. The last one capping off the 20-plus practices that they are allowed. Well, actually, they haven't. They will use some of the practices in preparation for the game as part of camp. But the allotted practices that they have for camp capped off by a scrimmage in Autzen Stadium. And we mentioned leading into it that it would be a chance for some of the young guys to sort of make their last push for some playing time and give the coaches hopefully some problems trying to figure out how to mix and match, who's going to redshirt, who's going to be on the scout team, who's going to travel. And we saw maybe not clear-cut answers today at the final scrimmage, but some very solid performances by some true freshmen.
Yeah, I think for the most part it backed up kind of what we thought going in. Which means there are going to be some tough decisions to make. Nobody was so poor or so great that was surprising either way that suddenly it probably changed your thinking dramatically on a guy. I mean, we've known for a couple of weeks that Royce Freeman was somebody who was going to be able to help this team this year. That depth issues at tackle meant that Terrell Crosby was probably going to be in the mix. That Charles Nelson looked like a guy who could play receiver, that Tanner Carew as a long snapper was probably the freshman most likely to play, and all that got reinforced. And then you've got another group of guys, sort of bubble guys. Khalil Oliver at safety has been really impressive for a couple weeks now, can play a lot of special teams roles. There could be sort of on the fringe of the 2 deep, probably third in the mix there at safety. Do you play a guy like him or do you hold him out? Justin Hollins or Jamie Swain at linebacker. Austin Mawata at defensive line. As you're going down a depth chart, figuring out what a normal playing rotation would look like, you've got a lot of guys that you're like, well, would they be the last guy in or the first guy out of a rotation? And so, yeah, those are the sorts of things coaches in the wake of that scrimmage are going to have to really spend a lot of time mulling over. To figure out which guys could help and which guys you might try to hold back and retain 4 years of eligibility.
A lot of young guys played in the scrimmage, the final scrimmage. A lot of the veterans, guys that have solidified spots on the 2 deep, either did not participate or very sparingly because their spots are somewhat secure at this point. Some guys that stood out to me: Reggie Daniels had a really good spring. Started camp, a guy that I thought got noticed out there quite a bit. Then, had maybe some valleys throughout the middle, but he really finished on a strong note. Had an acrobatic interception, broke up some passes, blocked a kick that ended up actually going through. I don't know how, but got his hands on it. So a guy very active, and that was an area where we knew that there were veterans coming back in the secondary, but not necessarily a whole lot of starting experience.
Eric Dargan is one of the 2 guys there. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. He's the leader on the back end. I think he's the most vocal guy, arguably with Ivo Ekbre-Olumu amongst the secondary guys. So who's going to start with Dargan? And Tyree Robinson, I think we probably would agree, has the higher ceiling than Daniels athletically. But Reggie's just a guy who, when he's in there, makes a lot of plays, like you talked about. I think is a little more sound thanks to his extra year in the program in terms of the fundamentals and the calls and things like that, and so finds himself in the right position a lot of times. So that's one I'm not sure how it's going to go. There were days I was sure it would be Reggie, days I was sure it would be Tyree. Coming out of the scrimmage, I'm not 100% sure. You've got a couple other positions like that, right guard, between Cameron Hunt and Jake Pisarcik, which way are they going to go? I think that one will definitely bleed into game week. It might be Thursday, Friday, even Saturday of game week before there's a true resolution at some of those spots.
You mentioned Oliver as well as a young guy that showed on the defensive side. On offense, Royce Freeman, as you mentioned, had a couple very long runs and where he was able to extend on the pursuers.
Yeah.
And, you just see him at full speed.
Yeah.
And who's going to stop him?
As Tyree said, he's a train. He looks like a train. He reminds me of Devin Allen in his running style in one regard, in that, neither guy, their first step, blows you away, but you give them a few strides to get up to full speed, and nobody's catching them. I think Byron Marshall is a little bit that way too.
Oh, yeah,
at the running back position, where if you timed their short shuttle or something like that, a Charles Nelson, DeAnthony Thomas, guys built like that are going to be quicker. But you give big, strong runners a head of speed, and you're not going to catch them. And I think Byron's like that, Freeman's like that, Devin Allen's like that. Devin had a big, long touchdown reception on one of the first plays of the scrimmage today, where it looked like the ball was going to be just out of his reach, and he, extends his arms, turns on the jets those last couple strides and hauls it in. A guy at that receiver position that I think really helped solidify what was a question mark coming into the fall.
Charles Nelson, with his speed, didn't catch a ton of balls today, but just his presence out there and his ability to really cause secondaries issues in keeping track of him, that's going to also open things up, and we saw it a little bit today. And then not a freshman, but another newcomer who started camp on a high note and finished on a high note was Zach Schuler, both in the return game and had a great reception for a touchdown today.
Yeah, from Ty Griffin, a quarterback who, you want to talk about peaks and valleys. He's a guy who really had his ups and downs, but there's sometimes, when he puts it all together, he really looks good, and he just had this beautiful ball over Khalil Oliver, our guy, the safety, who ended up making the tackle on Schuler to save a touchdown, but Schuler got behind him, and with his speed, he's a 10.5, 600 guy. Zach Schuler is a small package, but the guy is a burner, and got under that ball from Griffin and hauled it in nearly for 6.
So camp officially over. Chance to maybe go over some top moments or top players for you in this fall camp.
Well, Freeman really jumps out. The idea that a freshman running back could come in at what already was maybe one of the strongest position groups in the country, with Marshall and Tyner both coming back, and crack that rotation is really something. Gary Campbell, the running backs coach, is a guy who really likes to ride his main horse. Whether it's LaMichael James over Kenyon Barner, you can go back and see a lot of examples of that. A lot of people wanted to see more of Tyner last year, but when Marshall was healthy, he was the guy. Does Campbell go against form now because he's got 3 guys? Is it going to be a guy getting 20 carries, another getting 10, another getting 5, or are we going to see a bunch of guys getting 12 to 15? That's going to be really interesting to see. And then the receiver group, Devin Allen, Darren Carrington. We talked coming into camp that there was a lot of bodies there, a lot of guys with potential, just that it was unproven. And I think at least internally, there's really a deep belief that that group is now proven, even though obviously the final, biggest, most important step is to prove it on the field. But there's really a lot of confidence in the group of Dwayne Stanford, Devin Allen, Darren Carrington, Keenan Lowe, Charles Nelson, Chance Allen, even Johnny Lloyd, and Zach Schuler, guys like that. That doesn't even mention somebody with the talents of a B.J. Kelly, who's got the speed to help in situations too. So, really a lot of potential for that group.
Yeah, I would have to say, for me, the connection between Marcus Mariota and Devin Allen as camp progressed. Devin was impressive early, but it's like, oh, this guy's going to be able to help the team. And then there were moments where you're like, oh my goodness, this guy is going to be, he's going to be the primary guy for Marcus Mariota. Yeah. Now, I don't know that when it was all said and done, if I still have that opinion, but he just looked so poised and polished out there. The speed was real. Not that he was slow last year, but he looked strong, stronger this year running. As you mentioned, in comparing him a little bit to Royce, I think he's going to be a player that fans are going to gravitate to because of the track stuff a little bit. So he's going to have a little bit of pressure on him to perform, but at least so far he's been everything as advertised and more. Yeah, that connection, I think it was week 2. It was last week that it really opened our eyes. Like, wow, it just seems like Marcus knows where he's going to be. And is able to find Devin, so which tells you Devin's going the right places. Going into camp, I would have bet Keenan Lowe is probably the leading receiver at the end of the year. There was points last week I would have said Devin Allen.
I'm starting to lean towards Dwayne Stanford now, which tells you, A, that I'm a very wishy-washy person who doesn't like to make a commitment, but also that there's a lot of options. And, a lot of guys have looked really good at different moments, and not because other guys dropped off. Just, everybody's been pretty consistent. There haven't been a lot of dog days out there for the receiving group. It's been a good 3 weeks.
Well, circling back, when before camp started and we had our first Mac and Mose of the 2014 football season, we went over some sort of question areas. Wide receiver was definitely probably the main one we discussed, and I think the questions have been answered, at least going into game prep week, as to where that position group stands. Other things that we were wondering about: Don Pelham's transition from position coach to defensive coordinator. He looked comfortable out there. I thought the defense really responded to him. He's not maybe as vocal as Nick Aliotti. Like, DP still has his voice left at the end of camp, which is
Aliotti didn't have at the end of the first day.
Exactly. But when he does need to make his point, you could see those guys were locked in. So I think he's comfortable in that role. Mark Helfrich clearly more comfortable this fall than last, just in terms of how he would conduct practice from his own standpoint.
Yeah.
Where is he going to be involved? And we saw him on the defensive side. We saw him on special teams. We saw him coaching guys up at every position throughout fall camp. And I think that was really, it was nice to see him just more comfortable, more at ease, and more, just natural in the role.
Yeah, I have a sort of a strange perspective because I started in my new job at the same time he did his. So I look back at fall's camp last year, and for me it's kind of a blur, as I think I was trying to get my own feet under me. Mm-hmm. But this year, the amount that he jumped into position drills and was really coaching guys up jumped out to me. And you wonder if maybe last year he was sort of felt like he needed to take a big picture approach, mm-hmm. and maybe this year it's he's got the confidence to say, hey, DP's got the defense, whatever. Chin's has got the outside linebackers. I don't have to worry about what Gary's doing with the running backs. I can jump in with the quarterback receiver drills and coach a guy up on, his route running technique or what have you. I like watching guys coach, just teach, and so to see him jumping into drills like that was fun.
We also, discussed the fact that Boseko Lacombo was not coming back. Some of the starters that fans have got to know over the years that we're gonna have to that Oregon's gonna have to fill those spots. Linebacker, there were certainly numbers there, but like the secondary, how many of these guys, how would they respond to being thrust into more primary roles in the depth chart?
Well, I mean, the first guy I'd point to was Eric Armstead. I mean, he just was a beast all camp, start to finish. They're one of the truly most consistent performers and at a really high level on either side of the ball. I mean, just a guy who really looks like he's ready to take it to the next level, replacing Taylor Hart, whoever you want to say he's filling in for on the defensive line. Tyson Coleman, I think, is a guy people kind of knew about. Christian French, though, looks like kind of that third guy in the outside linebacker rotation, and can if kind of the Joe Walker, as Joe Walker is to the inside linebackers, could kind of play in a three-man rotation with Malone and Hardrick. French can be that guy with Washington and Coleman at the outside positions. Troy Hill had a great camp at corner. I mean, looks more than ready to fill in for Terrence Mitchell. And we mentioned how the two young safeties, Robinson and Daniels, are kind of raising each other's game. So it's that time of year when everything looks great, everything looks rosy. 12-0, whatever. Looks everything looks possible. Obviously we'll see over the next few weeks how all this is going to play out.
And one other player to mention, we talked about him a lot last year as a member of the scout team, was Danny Mattingly.
Yeah.
Didn't do a whole lot in the spring, and by the end of camp he was another guy that started to last few practices really started to stand out. And he's gotten bigger.
Yeah.
He looks like a different guy now. He's got beard and long hair.
He's a grown man.
I mean, he looks like he looks like the if you're building a linebacker from scratch,
right,
kind of want him to look something
Speaks
like
in
that.
grunts.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a amazing.
But he's another guy that could that they're going to need.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think Joe Walker's a sure thing. Knows the system, has experience, played last year, really grew from that experience, and is is close close to a sure thing, along with Rodney and Derek in the middle. I mean, Danny's still going to have to get the feeling of playing in games and all that, but I think he'll be fine. I mean, he had a great leaping interception right at the line of scrimmage today, where it's like the ball couldn't have been out of the quarterback's hands for a quarter of a second. And, you know, Danny secured it. He had a tackle for loss, which, you know, those are things we talked about this month, coming in this month. You know, could the defense go from being good, solid, to getting back to what it was during the BCS years, which was forcing a ton of turnovers, making tackles for loss, you know, not allowing a 3-yard gain, but the first guy penetrating and making that a 2-yard loss. And Mattingly looks like a guy, at least in those moments in the scrimmage today, that is going to make some of those game-turning plays where you're not just sort of giving up a little bit, you're actually taking something from the offense.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Like you said, everything, you know, you're real excited at this point of the season. I think getting through camp relatively intact. They have to feel happy about that. You know, you got a guy like Dargan, who, if he continues to sort of develop as a leader, I think he's the type of guy that can really sort of keep the intensity level up to where they need it to be. You know, when they're starting to play for real. Nobody
practices with more of an edge than Eric Dargan. I mean, every single day he's bringing it. You know, if they're thudding, he might hit you a little bit extra. If they're tackling, he's really going to get a little extra mustard behind it. I mean, he helps set the tone every day. You know, it's not all wine and roses. I mean, the kicking game, we'll see. You know, I mean, Wogan's got some things to prove. That miss in the spring game was pretty bad, and I think sticks in people's minds. And you know, he's going to have to make a few kicks before that's completely erased. You know, Ian Wheeler looks like he could be the punter. You know, this is a walk-on who's looked pretty good in practices that you and I have been impressed with for 2 years, but that's something to prove. You know, the offensive line depth, you know, when the two deep includes Terrell Crosby, a true freshman, Hanatali Lucy, a JC transfer, Doug Brenner coming off his redshirt year, you know, a walk-on like Matt Pearson might be the guy on the the guy on the twos that has the most experience, and that's you know, that's not a perfect situation. You'd love to see your second line have a little bit more experience in that, but you know, silver lining, hopefully, you know, a couple times in the first few games, those guys will be able to get a lot of reps under their belt and get comfortable as the Ducks get into the meat of the conference schedule.
Well, we're almost there, almost to August 30th. The South Dakota, I almost said San Diego, South Dakota Coyotes will be in Autzen Stadium to take on the Oregon Ducks. We will preview that game, and then when it's over, we'll get back into our normal routine where we'll wrap things up after and then preview each week, coming to you at least twice a week here on GoDucks.com. In the meantime, if you want to get a hold of us, any specific questions, things you want to know about that we didn't discuss, feel free. Hit us up on Twitter. I'm at McNamara UO. He is at Duck Football. Until next time, we'll see you.
Gets the corner into the end zone for the touchdown. It's through 50. He's got the speed. Touchdown.